Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fantasy festival, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 111, all the ones. We are now in mid-November, and if you're listening on Sunday morning when this podcast goes out, the World Cup is about to start. Very strange time of the year, very strange circumstance and environment to have the World Cup in. It's going to be a very strange one. And before we crack on with 111, I just say a massive thank you to Ronan McManus, who was my guest in episode 110 from the brilliant Brand New Zeros. I've literally been listening to that album non-stop. It's fantastic. So if you haven't heard that episode or their album, please go back and revisit 110. Because it is an absolute corker. So enough about the past. Let's look into the future. My guest for the 111th episode of the Fantastival podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by the man behind the virtual pub crew. And not only that, also the indie disco. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Indie Rob.
Hello, how are you?
Rob, very well. I'm all the better for having you on the Fantastival podcast. I can't wait to hear about your fantasy festival. I know how much you've agonised about it by your tweets and by talking to you before we start recording, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes. But before we talk about music, I always like to check in with my guests, find out how they've been pre-lockdown, post-lockdown. So Rob, mate, how are you?
Fantastic. As long as I'm busy, I'm great. Yeah, never down, always positive. So yeah, always keeping busy.
Good stuff. And it seems like you've certainly busy from what I can see on your social media profiles that we'll obviously come on and talk about. But before we do, who is Indie Rob? Who is the man behind the Indie Rob facade on social media? What does Indie Rob like to do when he's not talking or tweeting about music? Who are you, Rob?
Difficult question. No, not really. Dad of two, work in apprenticeships, and a pretty simple guy. Love music, love cooking, and love having plans, just try to stay positive. That's me, really simple person. I live by the sea, which is really cool. So, and that obviously helps with things like getting rid of the stresses of the day. And yeah, that's just me. Nothing complicated, I promise you.
So it's clear to me how important music has been to you, and obviously over lockdown you've obviously done the virtual pub crawl and the indie disco. Has music always been a big part of your life, even before that period?
Yeah, definitely. Being a kid, obviously, my mum was a big music head, but I was brought up with all kinds of whole mix of different things, from Cliff Richard and Diana Ross to Dire Straits and Pink Floyd and the Beatles. A whole host of music. I didn't probably find my musical roots until I was probably 18. Really, probably a bit clueless then, but I was pretty lucky in terms of the bands that were around when I was a younger man. Obviously, Oasis being my starting point, if you like. They were my big influence. I was 18 in 1994, so it was like the perfect time. So that really just became one of the linchpins in my life. Music's always been there. I've always watched live music. Always been to indie nights from that age. So yeah, I won't tell you all down, but I'm old enough. So I miss bands like the Stone Roses and the Smiths, although, my dad kind of listened to the Smiths. I missed those bands. I discovered them kind of later, but yeah, that's kind of where I kind of sit, if you like. So after that, then you just appreciate music, don't you?
Yeah, you certainly do. It sounds like we've had quite a similar journey into our musical environments and landscapes. Oasis was obviously the key point for me when I was 4. So you're 4 years older than me, so you found it when you were 18. That happened to me when I was 14, so I missed the Smiths and the same Stone Roses that you spoke about. So what made you do the virtual pub crawl? I guess as a starting point, I guess we can talk about what the virtual pub crawl is, but what kind of made you want to do something around music, I guess, at that time when lockdown was just about kicking in?
Silly idea. I was at home, I was on my own. I went out in the afternoon, I had some beers, and then from there I would have probably end up on a jukebox, and it would probably end up having a curry. That would have been a Good Friday, probably for us, and I couldn't do that. So was kind of talking to friends, and I just said, everybody was doing virtual this and virtual that. And I said, I'm just going to do a virtual pub crawl. So I kind of got myself ready, got all my gear on, set up beers around my house and glasses around my house, and just started tweeting virtual pub crawl, asking if anybody wanted to put anything on the jukebox. I was tweeting songs off Spotify. People started joining in, telling us where they were drinking from, different rooms, the bathtub in, the live lounge, the sun in. So people were in the garden. They were just, it was a brilliant summer as well, wasn't it? And that was the Friday. And by about 5 o'clock, I started drinking rum. And then I woke up in my clothes, and my last tweet was 4 a.m. Couldn't even remember that. And I didn't want to look at another drink for the rest of my life. And people are saying, can we do it again? It's just like, can we do it next week? I was like, no. And I did. I did it the next Saturday. And then it grew arms and legs. So the first step really after that was Russ from Brands in the Air got in touch and said, I'm going to do a logo for the virtual pub crawl. So we designed a logo together. And his first draft was yellow. And I'm like, what's yellow? He went, it'll stand out on Twitter. It'll stand out. So we did that. And then from there, Redders, who does work for Radio Matlock, got in touch and said, could I do a radio show? And I was like, well, and it was pre-recorded, so everyone wasn't kind of listening at the same time. But at the same time as well, going back to the first one, there's like Carl Matt, who's not really on Twitter now. He did a playlist, and it was something like 7 hours of music that people had tweeted under the virtual pub. I've still got it saved. And it's everything from the Kinks and the Who to Oasis and Fatboy Slim. It's really cool. And then it started just going from there. Then new bands started getting in touch, wanting to appear, wanting to do live music. City Lights, Revivalry. They were the two of the first originals. And then a band called Pretty Mafia. They got in touch. And Charlie started from Pretty Mafia started doing live songs during the virtual pub crawls. He was just playing cover versions and putting videos up, and everybody just joined in. And then from there we did merchandise, and then Greg from Alice House Hospice got in touch and said that the beer festival had been cancelled, which they make a lot of money every year for the hospice, and asked me and said, would I want to raise money? Russ had asked previous from Brands in the Air, he'd asked previously, did I want to do something for charity? And I was kind of going, everybody else is doing it with the NHS, clapping for the NHS, everyone's raising money. I didn't want it to be that. But I had a chat with him, and Greg kind of said, just set up a local hero page. So we set the tag of £500 and didn't expect anything from it, to be honest. I said I'd been over the moon with 200, and people from all over the country, but all over the world started donating. It was insane. We were doing about £1,000 a pub crawl, so raffles, so many people gave things, and it just grew until we were going out live on the radio. And then there was that many new bands. I said we need to do, and I come up with VPC Introducers, and that's when I thought another perfect person to do that as well. So I got in touch with Sam, and she said yeah, and Redders give her a crash course on being a radio DJ, and away we went. Yeah, and that was it really. Insanity is what you'd put to trend at number 4, from a stupid idea, and for people to be tweeting me going, what the F is the virtual pub crawl? Well, it's so bad that you're actually using the hashtag, just madness, Steve, absolute madness. But the best time, and the amount of people that got drunk, and the amount of people that messaged me saying it helped during like a really, really bad time. So yeah, it was really good. Something I'm really proud of, obviously, because it had, touched a lot of people, and it raised money, and I never have to raise another penny for the rest of my life now.
No, amazing! Like the way it kind of grew, and all the money you raised, you must be very proud. But if that's not enough, you then went and created the indie disco that's been just, I would say, as successful and just as popular. So what was it after doing the virtual pub crawl? Was it right, I want to go again and try and do something else, or was it just kind of you now have an audience to kind of speak to, and you thought, right, I'm going to try and get something out there now?
In some ways, the control freak in me, like a bit of OCD, if you like. The virtual pub crawl became much bigger than just me. And although like I kind of spearheaded it, and I tweeted a lot, and the amount of people that just used that hashtag and helped share that wasn't just me, but all the way through kind of 2020, we had this period of time with the virtual pub crawl. That came to the end at Christmas, where people got dressed up and in Christmas attire. It was just hilarious. And then that kind of ended just before Christmas, and that was it. I was adamant that was done. It's had its time. It was a mark of that particular time, and people look back on it, and hopefully, those who joined in had good fun. And then we were going back into lockdown, and I just had the idea of, well, the virtual pub crawl did well. How about Friday night's my favourite night? Finish work Friday. Fridays is just my favourite day of the week. I always finish mid-afternoon, and I just thought, I'm just going to do a playlist and people can join in, so I'm just going to do an indie disco. So from there it was, Friday, 9 o'clock, and people joined in. So a couple of people helped do the Apple playlist, so there was an Apple and a Spotify playlist. Everyone was listening together, and it was a similar thing, just having fun. Radio shows asked me to kind of get involved and do it live, and people have asked me to do it on a Saturday night, and its identity was Friday 9 p.m. So, and I stuck with that, and I did that for 12 weeks at the beginning of lockdown, in the beginning of 2021, and it was exhausting. It was, I was building 4 playlists at once to try and do 48 hours of music and not repeat yourself and maintain quality, so it's not cheesy. But the odd cheesy song goes in there, and to throw in a few twists and turns, if you like. And for people to go, never heard this one, which was brilliant. People like Dexter's and Vida and Neon Waltz featuring these bands who people hadn't heard of. And they just had these banger songs that no one had heard of. That was brilliant. Or I've not heard it for ages, which is obviously, back in the day, those songs where you go, you didn't know who it was, or you've not heard it for a long time. So indie disco was, good fun. And it's continued on, just not as regimented.
But happy to say, although by the time this goes out, you would have had the next indie disco, right? So yes. As we're recording this on the 16th of November. There's one planned for the 18th of November. So it's not been held yet, but by the time people listen to this, it's been and gone. I imagine you must be very excited about bringing it back.
Very much so, yeah. I love building the playlists. I like, one thing I'd say about social media and Twitter in particular is you have to be relentless. So you have to know the times to put your tweets out, and you've got to, even if you get 2 likes or 0 likes, you still just keep doing it. After that, once it goes on Friday and starts at 9 o'clock, I don't care who joins in. I don't care if 2 people listen along. I'll enjoy my night. And if I'm enjoying my night, then I'm hoping that a few other people will as well. But I'm not, this is very selfish, but I don't do the indie disco for other people. I do this for me, as in, it's the end of my week, and I'm gonna let my hair down, what hair I've got, and I'm gonna just have fun. I've got disco light in my living room, that type of thing. It's all about just jumping around and enjoying yourself, really. And 4 hours just goes over in a crack. It goes so quick.
Great stuff. I'm sure that'll be another massive hit. I guess what's the plan going forward for it? Is it just going to be intermittently in terms of when you fancy doing it, or do you have like a plan to do one a month, every 2 months, or is it just as and when?
I've no plan for 2023. I've got a few ideas for other things, but no plans. It's real life kind of kicks in, doesn't it? So the back end of this year has been, been on holidays, family holidays. We've got stuff going on. Obviously, work interferes with the fun that you can have. And I also, as well, I don't want people to get bored. I'd like them to look, if we do something, and it's something that people will look forward to and go a little bit of, not nostalgia, but almost like it's not something that you see all the time. And definitely the interactivity on the indie disco is very different. So I know there's a well-known radio station that does it during the day, and it's just like, it's not an indie disco. It's just a playlist during the day. An indie disco is, you're having a beer, you're having a dance around, and you're kind of, If you think about, we were talking about music and going to live gigs, imagine like the pre-gig, which you listen up to, that type of thing, where they're playing a whole host of music and people are having a beer. Or you've been to a gig and you go to an indie bar afterwards. That's what I want the indie disco to be like, if that makes sense. It's like almost like it's not too early. If people are having a little drink at home or whatever, or just getting the kids sorted, and then 9 o'clock and they can kind of join in. So no plans, no plans. Yeah, I'm happy for other people to do all that type of stuff.
I guess we'll see what the future holds. It's definitely exciting, and I can only commend you for your work on the virtual pub crawl and indie disco, because I think it's clear how much both have helped people get through what was a very difficult time for everyone. So you're obviously known as Indie Rob, right? So I always ask people what music they're into. Is it pure indie for you, or is there more to your musical taste than just indie?
Yeah, well, there's lots of genres of indie, isn't there? So I think as long as music's genuine, I don't really mind, if that makes sense. So, like, there's a couple of tracks by Lewis Capaldi that I think are great. There's tracks by Sam Fender, who I think is definitely an indie artist who's done well. And people are snobs over it. They turn their noses up. But I listen to a whole host of different music, from like old rock, stuff like The Doors, that type of thing, and Bowie, that type of thing, right the way through to Bee Gees. My parents loved the Bee Gees, so I don't mind the Bee Gees. But they're not my go-tos. My go-tos are I listen to a lot of new music. I get into a lot of new music. I've got a soft spot for quite a lot of new bands. And then on top of that, obviously the 90s music. But then kind of over the last 10 years, I've gone into kind of the folk indie stuff, the American stuff. So I love like bands like The National and Augustines as well, who are, all these bands are a bit special. The War on Drugs. These are like, very special bands, I think, and they're comparable to the likes of the Pink Floyds of the world and stuff. So it's a whole host. My musical taste is really eclectic, but I just can't get away with kind of manufactured fakeness, because I think music speaks to you, doesn't it, in some way or another, whether that makes you really happy or really sad, or makes you think or contemplate, or you're associated with a time in your life. Music is really, really emotive. So I think if it's not genuine, then I can't get away with it. It doesn't sit with me. It doesn't. The whole music industry doesn't kind of sit with me. The commercial side of things, I think it's terrible.
I went to
hear all these stories now, don't you, about all, like, it's all the corruption and stuff, and I just think, like, it's not real, is it? So all the stuff that we listened to when we were kids wasn't. It was just manufactured pap, wasn't it? And like, there's so many now, especially new bands. So many bands that are so genuine and so talented, and they're just getting overlooked. If I had money, I would open my own venue, and I would have music on 7 nights a week, and I'd just give all these new. There's no money in it, is there? So it makes it really tough.
That's really difficult. It's really tough.
I don't know if that. Sorry, Steve. I don't know if that answers your question about genres, but
no, it's a perfect and emotive answer. I mean, new bands. There's so many that I've learned just through doing the Fantastival, and I've only got a fraction of what the audience of what you're getting. So I can only imagine the volume of songs and bands will be sent your way. Any ones who you want to shout at? I mean, I appreciate it's probably loads, and you're going to forget quite a few of them. But anyone who you're really excited about coming up over the next year or two?
Coming up, I love the Utopiates. They're outstanding. There are loads of bands that everybody will kind of know now. So I've got a soft spot for the Royston Club. I think the Royston Club are absolutely banging. Dictator are unbelievably good. There's a band who've been around for a little while, but I only discovered them kind of early part of this year, and I seen them at the festival with Sunstack Jones. So they're excellent. They're from Liverpool. They're really good. If you've never seen Apollo Junction as a live act, they're absolutely phenomenal. Brilliant lads. So they're really, really good as well. And there's another one, but one of them's on my actual in my festival. So we'll talk about them a bit later, I think.
High praise indeed. So I mean, at the moment, I saw Biffy Clyro on Saturday, so I'm listening to Biffy again. I had Ronan McManus, like I said, so I'm listening to the brand new Zeros album relentlessly. They're my two big things at the moment. What are you listening to at the moment, Rob? What's doing it for you currently?
A whole mix, to be honest. Like I say, I'm kind of stuck on Apollo Junction. I think if you want to if you want to kind of be happy and the Apollo Junction of your voice. I'm currently going through the Doors back album, so I'm listening to back through the Doors because I think Jim Morrison has an unbelievable voice. And then after that, it varies. Albums vary. So I love to go back to all the old 90s stuff and go back over. And then just new music. There's loads of new bands. There's bands out there just doing their own thing, and it's too hard to kind of shout out one or two because there's a lot of people out there obviously doing a lot of stuff for the new music scene. So long may that continue.
Yeah, really exciting time, I think, in terms of the new music scene, in terms of what's going on there. So, Rob, let me take you back to, I guess, the early 90s, maybe the late 80s, and it's time for you to go and buy your first album or your first single. Do you remember what it was that you bought and those experiences?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit earlier than that, but my first single was The Flying Pickets, Only You. I think it was it the Yazoo cover, and it went to Christmas #1. I think was it 83 or 84. I was only young, 7 or 8 or something like that, and it was something like, I can't remember, but I'll have to ask my mum, but it was something like 99p or £1, do you know? And so I bought that, and I had a little record player. All right. Well, we had a little record player at home, and I played that little 7-inch like over and over and over because it was all a cappella, wasn't it? That version. I don't know if you remember the song.
I know the song, but I don't know I've got no idea of the version of it. I'm going to have to obviously go back and look at it.
Yeah. So The Flying Pickets, Only You. That's right. Going back, my first proper gig was 15, going to see Faith No More because one of my friends, his brother was a rocker into leather, the leather jackets and all of that type of stuff. And I kind of went to Newcastle City Hall to go and watch Faith No More after knowing kind of one song. And I was only, it was about 1990 or something like that. So that was kind of the first gig, if you like. But I didn't know what I was doing, I just went along with somebody's older brother. So yeah. And then, like I say, after that, musical taste was probably, didn't really have one. A lot of the friends near me were kind of listening to, there was like a lot of rave stuff going on. There was a lot of like mixed tapes and live tapes and that type of thing, and whatever was kind of on the charts. I remember I liked a bit of OMD. I liked one of their albums that came up, but nothing really until I left school at 16 and went into the kind of the cafeteria. Like we had like a form room and MTV was on, and that, then you've got bands like Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, and they kind of captured me a little bit, but I wasn't a big fan of theirs. Didn't really have much money either to go and buy. Kind of, I was a poor student. So yeah, and then obviously it moves on in 94 and it all kind of starts for me, really.
So this podcast, Rob, is all about you collating your fantasy festival. Have you been to many festivals? Are you a big fan of the festival format?
Yeah, I am, yeah. I went to early V festivals. I've never been to Glastonbury, and now I'm at the point in my life where I don't want to go. I think it's too big. I think it would just kill me. But I've done Leeds. I've done Kendal Calling quite a few times. I've been to some smaller festivals as well. But yeah, I loved V the first few years. I went V98, V99, V2000. Then I went to Leeds Festival, 2001. I've been to festivals on and off since then, and then I've been to, barring the last the last 5, I've been to 4 of the last 5 Kendal Callings. So fantastic, like small, well, getting into a medium-sized festival now. So yeah, I love the vibe. I think Kendal is like a little bit of heaven on earth, really. Good food, good beer, and a great lineup of music. This year was fantastic, so it was really good.
Do you have any standout festival moments at all?
Watching Travis sing Why Does It Always Rain on Me, and it'd been sunny all day and it started raining.
No way.
That was really, really ironic. I also seen Massive Attack at V Festival. That was really good. I seen Arctic Monkeys at Leeds Festival. That was awesome. And then just some of the smaller, like, probably mean nothing to other people, but just some of the smaller kind of performances, smaller tents. So I seen Jake Bugg in a small tent in Leeds. I can't remember what band was on, but it was a proper rock band beforehand. The crowd was stood there and it just went off around us. But then Jake Bugg came out and he smashed it. And he was kind of he wasn't big at that point. So he was really good as well. But yeah, probably too many. And to be honest, probably having too much fun to kind of pick out. You come away at the weekend and you go, that was awesome. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm kind of like, get up, start drinking, stay up until I fall asleep, get up, brush my teeth, start drinking again. And I'm in the arena for really early, or I'm like at stage really early. Yeah. Milk it, literally milk it.
Sounds like you're a fantasy pro. Sounds like you're the person to be at the festival with.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it. Depends which one we were at. Like, depends what you're playing, but I'd find something, I'm sure.
You spoke about Faith No More being your first gig. Do you have any favourite gig at all?
Biggest standout is Oasis, Loch Lomond. It gets overlooked because of Nebworth.
So I went to Nebworth. Loch Lomond was the week before, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was was it the 10th? Was it the 10th or something? Nebworth.
Nebworth was Saturday the 10th and Sunday the 11th.
Yeah. So Loch Lomond was Saturday the 3rd. Was the week before. So they had the Bootleg Beatles, Ocean Colour Scene, Black Grape, Cast, and Oasis. And Oasis kicked off with Columbia. Yeah. So, you know, it's like probably my favourite, or one of my favourite tracks by them. So, but the story of getting there, the whole weekend was just, there's probably some things I can say on air, and there's probably some things I can't. But it was just unbelievable. It was just the best, like, the best. And it was like my first big kind of outdoor gig, if you like. Yeah, it was just really, really special. And like a massive band, weren't they? So at that particular point in time, I was 96, so I'll have been 20. And it was just, we just invaded this small Scottish town, and there was, 80,000 people or something. It was just insane. So yeah, that's probably my standout. After that, there's been others. Even this year, I went to see the War on Drugs, and they were just blow your socks off, like so good. So some gigs are good for like the band itself. Others are for the atmosphere. Depends on what you talk about your favourite gig, because sometimes you can have a really fantastic performance and the crowd ain't great. And the Oasis gigs later, I think, weren't. Not so much how they performed, that was part of it, but just the crowd that they created. It was it changed. I think the early 90s gigs were, you know, it's like you go and see James and people are waiting for Sit Down. I think, you know, even if Oasis come back, it would be probably people who weren't fans in the first place, who were just waiting for the big, well, all of the tracks are big, so. But you know what I mean?
Totally.
It wouldn't, I don't think it'd be all that.
Great stuff.
That's my opinion.
Great stuff. That Loch Lomond gig sounds amazing. I went on the Saturday to Nebworth, and I remember it vividly still. And it was the Bootleg Beatles, Chemical Brothers, Ocean Colour Scene, Manic Street Preachers, Prodigy, and Oasis, and that was amazing. And I remember being gutted because the Sunday was again Cast, Cooler Shaker, Charlatans, and the Manics, which is almost a Fantastival from that era in itself, and it actually happened.
Absolutely is.
And it actually happened. And all those bands were about to release their big album. So Prodigy had The Fat of the Land, Manics was Everything Must Go, Cast were like the debut album, Ocean Colour Scene was like Moseley Shoal. So you look back and go, that really was the time to see all those bands in that one place. So the Nebworth and the Loch Lomond gigs have spoken about quite a bit on this podcast. So like I said at the top of the pod, this is all about getting our guest tonight, Indie Rob. He gets to collate his fantasy festival. So Rob gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full. And at the end of his fantasy festival, Rob gets to choose an encore, which all 5 acts can perform together at the end of his Fantastival. So 5 acts take 5 time slots. Very simple. And like I said, I had Ronan McManus on the last episode. He created his X-Fest Fantasy Festival as follows. So his opening slot, he had Ron Sexsmith, who retweeted a tweet from the pod about an hour ago. So thank you to Ron if you're listening. In his super second slot, he went for Delamitri, who made their first Fantastival appearance, which was surprising actually. Midway Madness, he went for the Lemonheads and had them play It's a Shame About Ray. Again, first time the Lemonheads been picked for a fantasy festival. In his pre-headline act slot, he went for Crowded House, and in his headline slot, he went for Pearl Jam. And at the end of his fantasy festival, for his encore, he had all 5 acts play the track A Long December by Counting Crows, and had that as his encore. So it's all very simple: 5 acts, 5 time slots, and an encore. But before we talk about all your acts, Rob, and you've already mentioned loads of amazing acts already, so I'm quite excited to see who you've chosen. We need to give your fantasy festival a name, and we need to give it a venue. So, Rob, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
Okay, so the festival's called Days Gone By.
I like it.
Days Gone By.
And I guess, is that pretty self-explanatory?
I don't know. What do you think it means?
I think it means we may be looking at some previous, but as well as some new music like you've alluded to. So I'm quite excited to see who you choose. So we can hold this festival anywhere you want. It could be in your front room where you're holding your virtual pub crawls. It can be back in Loch Lomond. You can take us anywhere you want to go. We will follow you, Indie Rob. So where do you want to hold Days Gone By?
Well, me being a northern lad, we're going to go with something a bit kind of special. I don't think anyone's ever played there. I was kind of Googling to find out. We're going to go with Alnwick Castle in Northumberland, all right, and the grounds of Alnwick Castle. So I don't know how big it would be, and I don't know what it could hold. But obviously, you know, the North's got a lot of castles and it's got a lot of heritage. So that's where it would be. Alnwick's not too far away from the sea. It's kind of the perfect little location to have, an overnight festival. Be perfect.
Great stuff. I don't think we've ever held a fantasy festival in near a castle or on the grounds of a castle before. So first time for everything. So I'm well excited to go and see Alnwick Castle. So we've got a name, we've got a venue. Before we talk about the 5 acts, you've told me and alluded it again on social how difficult it's been to get down to just 5 acts. So before we talk about the 5, are there any acts that you want to mention who you love but just haven't been able to get into the Days Gone By lineup?
Yeah, well, these could have probably done it on their own anyway. Arcade Fire were a shout out that I could have easily headlined. The Doors, definitely, they were going to be my headliner. Same with Bowie as well. I think David Bowie would have been unbelievable to see in the flesh. James, a band I've seen a lot. I think they're massively misunderstood when it comes to festivals, because if you're a James fan, you're happy because they could play 10, 15 songs from 200, and I've never seen them play the same set list or anywhere near the same set list, and I've seen them countless times. So James within. One of my all-time favourites, the Charlatans, but I've cut them out. And then a couple of the new bands, and a shout out to Days Gone By, was Dictator.
Of course it is. Joe, when you said that, I was like, that's a lyric, but I can't quite place it. Of course it's Dictator.
Yeah, so it was Dictator, but obviously it wasn't just their song. So sorry to them, lads. And Apollo Junction as well. So my headline, my opening slot was the kind of typical what they do at the festival. They bring in a newer artist to kind of open up, if you like. Or if they do, like what they're doing now, is they put on a big artist to try and draw people in, because, you know, they're trying to make money, aren't they? But, Apollo Junction were a shout-out as well, because I've seen them this year. I've seen them this year at Kendall Carlin. Well, I've seen Apollo Junction 3 times this year, and they're absolutely brilliant. I've seen Dictator twice. So both bands, could have opened up the festival for me.
But there can only be 5. So here we are. We're going to talk about them now. So you mentioned some really great and strong acts who aren't making it, but time to talk about the ones who have. So Days Gone By, 2 o'clock. The excitement's in the air around Alnwick Castle. So Rob, who are you going to have as your opening act?
Okay, so the opening act. Well, I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts. I listened to Sam, and Sam was talking about this band as well, and she didn't put them in. And I thought, God, you had to put them in. You have to. And this band, who are so tight, musically brilliant, an unbelievably strong lead singer, do a lot on social media, do a lot for charity. They've got an unbelievable producer, an unbelievable lead guitarist. And I've been drinking with them a couple of times this year as well at their gigs. So I went to their opening night in Edinburgh, and then I seen them again in Newcastle. I'd also seen them in Liverpool, which might be a clue, and seen them as well in Manchester and it's the Heavy North.
Great
So
shout. Great.
debut album is unbelievable. Introduced to me by Dan Potter, actually, on one of his playlists. He played Line to Myself, or Line to Yourself. And yeah, just got to know Kenny, got to know the lads, and they deserve, they're just unbelievably good. In Edinburgh, they said come down early, so we went out on the afternoon for a couple of drinks and called in as we had the sound check. And I was just like, they're in Sneaky Pete's, this little tiny venue. And yeah, and then I took them out boozing around Newcastle and took them to a little place called Booze and Bourbon. But their album's brilliant. They're brilliant live. They don't falter. I'm looking forward to their new stuff when that comes. And I just think they probably need a break, really. And they would absolutely, blow the roof off. I have no doubts.
Great shout. Great new act. Never been chosen for a fantasy festival before, so this is the first time they've been mentioned to play one. Obviously, been guests on the Fantastival, so I had Steve, Jose and Kenny. Great set of lads, great album, and I'm delighted they get to make their Fantastival debut. So they're going to be your opening act at Days Gone By. They get to play from 2 till 3. The crowd are going to love that. We'll take a half-hour break. That'll take us to 3:30, and it'll be time for your Super Seconds act, Rob. So who are you going to have as your Super Seconds act?
So Super Seconds was going to be the Charlatans, but then going back to a band who released an album and then never got to tour it. So a band I've seen multiple times, and it's Doves. If you've never seen Doves live, they're just incredible. Another incredible band. So seen them at festivals, but I've seen them quite a few different venues. So yeah, and unfortunately, Jimmy's not, in the best headspace. So they never got to tour that album, which is really, really unfortunate. So I had tickets for that and never got to see them. So being my festival and I can have anybody, I'd want Doves to kind of play those new tracks live, which nobody's been able to see. So that's the kind of reason for that. And also as well, when they play Pounding and There Goes the Fear, Kingdom Rust, and then getting into Cedar Room and those first 2 albums by Doves are just, they're, Lost Souls and The Last Broadcast are just an absolute work of art, I think. Yeah, and I think they followed on that 90s with those couple of albums really, really well. And I think the early part of 2000s, the noughties, if you like, were a really good time for music. The likes of Kings of Leon with their debut album was brilliant. There was a lot of bands bringing out good music, and Doves, I think for me, Doves were one of those. So it's definitely a festival favourite, definitely a live band favourite. So yeah, that's mine. I'm sure they've featured.
No. First time they've been chosen for Fantasy Festival. They have been mentioned before because I called them Nerd Doves, and Paul Hammond came back to me and went, no, they're Doves, not the Doves. But first time they've been picked for a Fantasy Festival. By hearing you talk about them, I instantly want to go and put on Lost Souls because I used to love that album. And when I worked at HMV Oxford Street, when it moved from where it was to across the road, the Doves were the last band to play there, and the Doves played on the roof.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I got into the Lost Souls album, because I hadn't heard of them before, but I was lucky enough to see the Doves. They supported Oasis at Wembley. They supported Embrace at Shepherd's Bush Empire. I saw them in support slots quite a bit. I thought they were a great band. So great choice there, Rob. Well, not the Doves. Doves play your Super Seconds act. They're going to play from 3:30 to 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break. That'll take us to 5 o'clock and your Midway Madness act. So 2 acts down. Time for Midway Madness. Who is going to be your Midway Madness act, Rob? So
Midway Madness. So I like the name of that slot. And there was only one band that could take that in terms of madness. And I'm talking. So I was lucky enough to see the band in '94 twice. First time I seen them was in a place called Middlesbrough Arena. Middlesbrough Arena was a 2-floor. First floor was kind of Northern Soul and kind of the mod scene. And then up on the first floor was all of the kind of indie stuff. So it was a clear divide. And the mod kids, they had a bit more money, they were a bit older. They dressed a bit better than the indie kids. So you had to walk through there to get upstairs. And I've seen loads of bands there, so people like Blair. But it's Oasis. And they're going to play the full album. They're going to play Definitely Maybe. So we're taking it, Days Gone By, we're taking it right back to kind of 94. So the full album from start to finish, finishing with Slide Away. You don't get better than that, really. Yeah, with Columbia in there, which is like, it's such a dirty tune, isn't it? And Live Forever. They've just got so many great tunes on that. Bring It On Down as well. Underrated track from Oasis, I think, as well. So yeah, it's Midway Madness, and they're playing Definitely Maybe in full.
I love it. What a way to mark their 7th Fantasy Festival appearance. I think Definitely Maybe still holds up. And there's even the weakest track on there, which I think people say is Diggs' Dinner. Even Diggs' Dinner is still an incredibly strong track for me. Although it's wedged in between all these absolute bangers, it's still like an amazing song.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of comparisons. I've done it myself, like comparing the Stone Roses debut album against Oasis' debut album, and it's very difficult to choose. Yeah, so there's that comparison continuously, isn't there? About but then you can put in other new debuts. So I put in Arctic Monkeys' debut album alongside that as well. Like as in debut albums that have really had a massive impact, like in the music scene, if you like. These bands release these albums and they'll never ever touch them again because they were just so strong. If you look at it in the background, Noel was on fire at that particular point in time in writing. Same with the Roses. That was accumulation of all their writing, wasn't it, at that particular point in time, putting that on vinyl. So those albums, they're timeless. My son's 18 and he loves Definitely Maybe. And if he plays both albums, the Roses, and I've done it many times, he prefers Definitely Maybe. That's just his opinion. Probably because he's been weaned on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's iconic, and at that point they were just ripping it up. Like I seen them twice that year. So I seen them once upstairs in the place called Middlesbrough Arena, about 150 people or something. Every time I drive past it in Middlesbrough and I've got the kids in the car, they go, "We know, Dad," because I'm about to tell them the same story. And then I seen them in Middlesbrough Town Hall in the December just after Christmas, and there was like 1,500 people. And that was just over a space of about 7 months. Their rise was just meteoric, wasn't it? So, and that was an unbelievably good gig as well. And at that point, Liam was on fire, like vocally he was on fire. He was still raw as well. And his voice, he could just blast it out, So yeah, and there's a few stories I'll tell you off air about that particular time as well. Yeah, about the band and all that sort of stuff. Not for a family podcast.
Great stuff. So Oasis, 7th appearance, first time they are playing the Midway Madness slot. Only ever been headliners or pre-headliners before, but Noel, Liam and the boys are happy to play Days Gone By and are happy to do your Midway Madness slot. So they're going to play 5 till 6. We'll take one more half-hour break. That'll take us to your pre-headline act, who are going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and they're going to get an hour and a half. So Rob, who's going to be your pre-headline act?
Yeah, so discovered this band about 2010, 2011. And really difficult to sum them up, as they sound, when you hear them recorded, they sound quite sedate. The vocals are some of the best. He has one of the most distinctive voices you'll ever hear. The band's The National, an American band who I've been lucky enough to see 3 times. So I got to see them in Dublin, I've got to see them in Hyde Park, and I got to see them at Castlefield Ball in Manchester as well. The first album I heard was High Violet, and there's like Blood Buzz Ohio, which I played on the Indie Disco I think 3 times. I played more of their tracks on the Indie Disco. He's got such a baritone vocal, Matt. But the band is made up of another 2 brothers, so that one of them's got a music school, and in some respects they kind of remind me of like Jose from Heavy North. They produce their own stuff. They've got, when you speak to Jose from Heavy North, he's got like, he's quite academic, but he runs his own music studio, and he's doing what he loves rather than what probably could make a lot more money doing. And the Dessner brothers, who are in The National, are just phenomenal. So they play keys and they play guitar, and they're just really, I would say they're geeks, but they're very talented geeks. And yeah, they're just unbelievably good. The drummer's phenomenal. Yeah, where to start with them? They've got a massive back catalogue as well. So yeah, they're my pre-headliner, and I love the fact that people don't know The National are.
Great
and
shout.
People never listen. people have never listened to them, and that absolutely is music to my ears. It's like my little hidden gem, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, they won't be for much longer because they've never been picked for Fantasy Festival before.
Really?
Which may or may not be a surprise to you. No, never been picked before.
Wow.
First time, and they get to play Days Gone By for an hour and a half. So they're going to give us 90 minutes from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We're going to take one more half-hour break, and it'll be time for your headline act. Now, I don't know which way you're going to go with this. I can't work out who your headline is going to be. You haven't alluded to anyone throughout the podcast other than Oasis, who I thought might walk in there. So I'm a bit intrigued to see who you're going to go with, Rob. So who's going to headline Days Gone By?
Agonising decision, but I see on Twitter a lot of opinions, and opinions are like arseholes, aren't they? Everyone's got them. But I'll argue this all day long when they say that they're not good, they're not brilliant. Their back catalogue is possibly the greatest of all time. It's the Beatles. Like, the Beatles didn't play live for so long. I watched the documentary that was out, and they're just super talented. And I just think that, and as well as that, people talk about their best album. I couldn't pick a best album because when I was kind of 20, 21, I had obviously the Oasis influence, but I also kind of used to wear like turtlenecks and had long hair, and used to wear like black cords and stuff like on certain nights out. Very like John Lennon-y kind of vibe. And they were like a big influence. And my cousin, he's a bit younger than me. When he started playing guitar, his influence was the Beatles. And I've went through all the back catalogue, and for Christmas around 18, I got like Please Please Me on tape, and got Help on tape, and then I got some on CD, and it's really difficult. But the Magical Mystery Tour is a massively, massively underrated album. So the second half of that album is incredible, like really, really incredible. I think the tunes on there are just, absolutely out of this world. And I think the Beatles are something else. The best songwriting duo of all time. I think the second side, it had Eye on the Walrus, it had Strawberry Fields, Hello Goodbye, I'm just trying to think what else was on there. Penny Lane, I think, and it finished with All You Need Is Love. Like,
it's not bad.
And this is an album that's not even rated, and I just think the Beatles are truly, truly iconic. Oasis wouldn't exist without them, and that's kind of the rationale. It's like the little brother and the big brother, and if I was going to bring any band back, it would be them.
Well, you're in luck. You're in luck because we are bringing them back for Days Gone By. They headline. When I started this podcast, I thought the Beatles would be in everyone's episode. This is only the 5th time they've been picked for Fantasy Festival lineup. The first time they've been picked since episode 70 as well. So they've gone almost a year without being picked. But they're back. They're headlining Days Gone By, and they get to play till 11 o'clock. So at 11 o'clock, the Beatles are going to bring out the National. They're going to bring out Oasis, who are going to be in their absolute glory coming out on stage to play with the Beatles. They're going to bring out the Doves and Heavy North as well. And they all get to play one song to close Days Gone By. Rob, you can have any song ever recorded by anyone. What are you going to have all your Fantasy Festival acts play as a collective?
It's really, really predictable and kind of easy. And I would have had what Rick had, which was Bittersweet Symphony, because I think it's one of the greatest. I think Richard Ashcroft's one of the best vocalists that's kind of ever lived. He's torn to his voice. So I couldn't have that. And I wouldn't have the Beatles playing Oasis, but I would have Oasis playing the Beatles. So by that logic, it was Hey Jude. And it's a truly, truly iconic song. I've seen McCartney do it. I've seen him get people up on numerous times. And it's a big, feel-good, sing-along, love, and, kind of everyone living their best life. And I think festivals are about that, aren't they? They're about leaving, like, the stress of work. They're leaving the stress of money, leaving the stress of everything else, everyday life behind, going away, going off the radar, not worrying about, social media, not worrying about anything other than just where your next beer is and are you going to find a clean toilet. So in that spirit, Hey Jude kind of sums up what a festival's all about, really. And then I was going to do All You Need Is Love, but that might be a bit too soppy.
A great closeout to a great fantasy festival lineup. So let's lock it in. So you can still change your mind, Rob, up until the point where we lock it in, which is now. So we've got Days Gone By taking place at Alnwick Castle. Opening acts got Heavy North, Super Seconds, Doves, Midway Madness, Oasis, who are going to play Definitely Maybe in full. Pre-headline acts got The National. Headlining your fantasy festival, we have the Beatles, and for your encore, all of your 5 acts are going to play Hey Jude. Rob, you happy to lock that one into the Fantastival
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great shout. Another great fantasy festival lineup. So I guess before we end this one, Rob, you've spoken about kind of indie disco. I mean, what are your plans over the next couple of months? I know we kind of maybe covered it before. Is it just kind of see where everything takes you and where you end up?
Yeah, so there's obviously, there's been a few questions asked about potentially doing another virtual pub crawl live gig. I don't know if my days of promoting gigs is over. I don't know. I've been having chats with Dan Potter about potentially doing something live as well, but that's into kind of 2023. The indie disco, I think, if it keeps getting asked for, it'll keep reappearing. If people aren't interested and don't want to do it, then it'll just be me in my kitchen. But yeah, I love the format. I love what it's about. I love the vibe of the night. So yeah, we'll see what happens. No definitive plans, but not ruling anything out either, shall we say?
Keeping cards close to your chest on that one.
No, it's whatever happens, I'll always be around music. I always have been. So in one guise or another, I will always be doing something. And if that's, just attending gigs, then it's just attending gigs. And I'm quite pleased with that.
So if anyone has been listening and wasn't aware of you before, which I'm sure they probably were, but if anyone wants to find out what you're up to, about the indie disco virtual pub crawl, hit the backstory of that, where can people find you on social media, Rob?
Yeah, so my Twitter account, I'm only on Twitter, so my Twitter account is @IndieRob9. And yeah, I tweet fairly regular. So yeah, indie disco, always newbies welcome. Always, yeah, there's always kind of some music being shared on there. So just watch out. And there are other people out there as well. So you'll see a lot of new Music Friday, hashtag New Music Friday on Twitter is quite a big one as well. A lot of people releasing new stuff. Dan Potter, Shiner Sam, they're kind of biggies. Eddie Hansen as well around new music. So those guys, give them a follow. If you like your indie tunes and you like your new music, they're the people to follow.
Some awesome names mentioned there. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 111th episode of the Fantastival podcast. If you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe and give the podcast a review on iTunes, or you can rate the show on Spotify, which is very important that you do so. And if you're listening and had fun for the first time, recommend this to all of your families and friends. You can find Rob on Twitter. You can also find the Fantastival podcast on Twitter, Fantastival P. And if you're not on Twitter but you want to contact the pod, you can do so by emailing fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, we don't play music on the podcast, but I do get some playlists from time to time. So if Rob has time, I might make him make another Spotify playlist of the acts that we've spoken about in this episode, and we'll put that in the episode description for everyone to go and have a listen to Rob's chosen acts. So Rob, how have you found being on this podcast? I've really enjoyed having you on it. I know how much you've agonised about your fantasy festival lineup, but I think you've come across as a great guest who's so passionate about music and really genuine, which I think is an amazing trait to have. So, I mean, how have you found it?
The choices were difficult because when you have so many choices to make and you love so much music, it's, could have filled it 10 times over. I could have done a 3-day festival for you. But you're a great host. I love the concept. I think it's great. And if you take off the blinkers, there's loads of music out there, and it's not always kind of predictable. I'm pleased that there was a lot of my acts that were first choices, so I'm glad about that as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having us.
Been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to participating, hopefully, in many indie discos to come on Friday nights and being told to shut up by the wife and come to bed. So that is it then. I'll be back next week with episode number 112. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.